Hi everyone, it's Michelle Lloyd here, founder of United Art Space, and Kelly's just getting set up because she was setting up from her studio and had a few internet problems. So I think she's set up now, so I'm just going to bring her in. She's one of, she's set up. Hello, Kelly. So for those who don't know Kelly Herrick, she is an awesome landscape painter who is part of my UAS membership, and she has agreed to come in today to make or show us how to make a memory landscape. Welcome, Kelly.
Hi, thank you for having me. It's really fun.
It is really fun. So people might not know what a memory landscape is. So should we talk about that first before we get started?
Yeah. So I always think of a memory landscape as something more than just a landscape drawing or painting. So for me and for many people, being out in the landscape, seeing art and making art around the landscape is actually about connecting to memory, connecting to places they might have visited as a child, connecting to their favourite place, perhaps somewhere they were proposed to or proposed, somewhere they'd love to retire to. So it's all about grounding yourself in a landscape and using different tools and techniques to create something more than just a picture or a painting. That's why we've said on the materials list to bring collage and sort of 3D or physical elements from that landscape. And I think right now, I don't know about anyone else, but my daily lockdown walks and kind of being in nature are the things that are keeping me sane for sure. So grounding in these landscapes, and perhaps landscapes that we miss or landscapes that we long for, is really, really important, and really helps us reconnect to the world outside of our four walls. So that's what we're going to do today.
So everyone had the material list, so we'll just recap on that. So it was to choose a photograph or a picture or a place, like Kelly's just described, that means something to you. So if you don't have it with you, you can watch this session and then bring your picture, find it in the week, and then grab a load of materials like magazines, papers, glue, painting materials, drawing materials, as anything, and then something to put it all onto, preferably canvas or board, or if you're just struggling, just get some thick paper, and I'm sure that will suffice, won't it, Kelly, if people haven't got if you've run out of canvas or board.
So you can get a frame as well as something that you might want to repurpose. Frames are good.
Yeah, and I was just saying to you, wasn't I, Kelly? So because I leave everything to the last minute. So this morning I was just looking for my image, and I found it really emotional. So I just wanted to just say that at the minute, because of the times that we're in. I think that I just looked back through my photographs and I was thinking, what would I choose? And actually the first photograph I chose, this was actually lying in my studio. It's not a great photograph, because it was quite an overcast day, but this was Banff in Scotland, and this was the very first painting holiday that I went on by myself, and I just got on a plane and just travelled up there, but then I started to think, actually Barmouth in the UK, it's a seaside town, has become a real special place for my family and I, because we go there every year. And the kids have been going there since they were babies. And that's when I started to feel really emotional, because I got this photograph printed this morning, but I started to look back at, and that's a real special capture, girl there with her daddy. And this is what's so special about the landscape. It's it's not just the place that I long to be, it's that feeling at the time and how happy and free we were. And I started to well up thinking, and in the pictures I could see some photographs that I've never really felt drawn to before, but today, feeling the way I do, I started to just look at pictures with me just laughing in that moment, and I started to well up thinking, oh my gosh. So I think that's how powerful these landscapes are. And this is what you do, don't you, Kelly, in your artwork? You're a landscape painter.
Yeah, I think just taking a photograph is wonderful, and you do capture some amazing moments, don't you? Especially when people don't know they're looking for photos. But I think landscape art is more than just a photo, and it's trying to, my work particularly, I try and evoke a sense of the weather and the sky and the mood, and yes, very colourful. I'm a colour magpie, so I do try and kind of capture a sense of stuff that you wouldn't be able to take with a camera, and that's really, really personal to people. And I think we often think of portraiture as probably the most personal art because it's people you recognize or people that you love in your family. But I think people sometimes overlook the sense of place and home they have in landscapes. And that might be because you're wild-hearted and you love the moors, or it might be that you love to curl up with a book in a local village. You know, there's all sorts of landscapes that do this for us. So yeah, they're really active.
Yeah, I can see everyone's hopping on saying hi. So I'm just going to say, let us know where you're tuning in from around the world, and please let us know what your special place is. If you had a think, let us know in the comments now, because I know we've got people tuning in from all around the world. So tell us, what is your special place? You know, I know you probably got many. I found it really difficult to choose one. And so let us know though, if you could choose one, what's the first one that maybe pops into your mind, or what is that special place where if you could go back to now, you'd go back there right this second? And so I'm just going to say hello to everyone before we jump in. Stacey's here. Hello, Kelly. Hello, Rona. Donna. So Dee tuning in from Ireland. Rebecca's from Winchester in the UK. Carrie's from Australia. Jeanette's from Australia as well. Lots of Australians in. Hello, Sylvan. Hello, Julie. Hello. Lovely to see you all. Okay. Stacey's from Wolverhampton, which is just down the road from me. And it's nice and sunny in the UK, which is lovely. Yeah. So everyone's writing down their special place. So we'll come back to those comments and have a look in a minute. So let's get stuck in, Kelly. Tell us what we're going to be doing.
Okay, so I wanted to do something quite simple and graphic with you guys today, just because I think it would help us not overcomplicate things for a demo, but also this is one of my favourite places. So I'm drawn to the coast and I paint the coast a lot. There's something about water for me. So this is a photograph that I took in Norfolk. So we go to North Norfolk a lot. And what I love there is that the skies are huge, the beaches are huge. There's not much in the way of sort of cliffs and hills, obviously, it's Norfolk. But this landscape really gives me space to breathe and sort of a sense of freedom. And I think that's something I was drawn to for this project and demo today, because right now, you know, I'm struggling to get that sense of freedom, go for a walk in my local area, and it's nice to see people, but there's too many people. You know, I just kind of want to get away from it all. So I really like the sort of emptiness of the Norfolk landscape. And I love a boat. I love a boat and a beach hut and a seagull. And I know they're all cheesy and people think
it's really symbolic though, isn't it? Yeah.
I know. But why are we all so drawn to them? Why do you take photos of them all the time? But there's a tip. If you are going to choose a landscape with something in it that you think might be considered twee or cheesy, go for something that's quite simple and graphical. So as you can see, this is actually a photograph I took when I was painting there at Brancaster Stave, I think this was. And the boat is obviously, I'm going to ignore the second boat. I'm just going to go for one boat, and these uprights you get everywhere in Norfolk with the creeks. I'm going to probably just change those around a little bit. So
it's good to use a picture that has kind of big solid shapes that people can cut from. Yeah.
So if we're going to start doing collage over it, onto it, with it, yeah, absolutely. You want some good sort of shapes and composition that you can work into. Yeah. So anything that's like a really flowery, detailed cottage garden,
yeah,
that would be quite hard. Or if you want to do stuff with detail, maybe do it on a larger scale so that you can make shapes, but it's on a bigger scale. So I did have a frame, but it's outside in my studio where I set up. But I chose a frame that fits this size. And what I would suggest to you is, if you're going to use a frame, use a box frame that's just got a little bit of depth to it. I just grabbed one that I had for today.
Yeah, a bit like that.
This is just an 8 by 10 inch, 20 by 25. And what I would say to everyone is, when you're doing a project that you're going to put into a frame, keep these bits of paper that come with it, because it's so helpful for templates. Don't throw these away, because we're going to use these to build up the template over the top. Or if you've just chosen a piece of card or paper, then obviously we've got that. So this is like some thick watercolour paper. I'm going to whiz around in a minute, but basically I've brought some materials. So I have brought some colours that I liked, including some brown paper of some papers. I have also brought a lovely catalogue of Norfolk Hideaway cottages, and I literally haven't prepped this demo because I wanted it to be a bit more free flowing. So you've got some really nice, oh, it's always backwards, isn't it, on these things?
Yeah.
Pictures in here, like beach huts, and also maps and things can be really nice in collage.
I love maps in collage. Isn't it interesting how maps just, I don't know what it is about maps, but they just add something so lovely, and old written text out of books. I don't know, it just feels so lovely.
You know, things that you actually, printed materials that you actually used on that holiday or that trip. So things like ticket stubs, anything that gets a stamp on it, or, you know, if you were doing National Trust and you got a sticker or a stamp, things like that work really well because they've got a sense of personal connection.
Yeah, in fact, you know, you said to pull out some like more three-dimensional objects. I know I can't use these in the art itself, but just having them here takes me back to that place. So my kids found rocks off the beach from Barmouth, and just having them, so this was interesting for me because I've never really done this before, but just having these here whilst I'm recreating this piece, it's like it makes you feel more connected, doesn't it? So it was a really good tip to pull things out. Yeah,
and we pick up something. I think what's nice for a memory landscape, there is a really lovely balance between your sketch, drawing, painting, whatever it's going to be that you create, and things from that place. And that's the difference between a memory landscape and a landscape painting. So we're looking for that physical connection. So the object, the very expensive piece of tack that I brought back last time I was in Norfolk, is this little bit of knot that I found next to one of the boats. Obviously, somebody was using this to tie something on a boat. I'm so not boaty, so I don't even know what
the terminology.
I just looked down onto, they call it the hard bit of ground where the tide comes in. And I was just walking along there, and it was just the lovely blue, you know, cyan, and it popped up. So that was my object. So I was hoping that people might have more of a 3D object. Obviously, big pebbles are quite hard, but it might be a seashell, a pressed flower, or like I said, a ticket or something.
Yeah.
So it's really good to get a blend of printed or man-made things or collage materials and your own creative things, because it's supposed to feel and look like a combination of elements that give you that rounded landscape project. For my actual materials, I've just got a few bits of watercolor and some acrylic inks, and I've got things like sticky glue, and I might dab on a bit of blue tack. I wouldn't suggest, if you're going to keep it, that you use that. I'm just going to use that for the demo. But obviously, if you want to use it properly, use proper collage paste or gels or whatever you're going to use. And another tip as well, if you're going to put it in a frame, sometimes, especially if you have 3D items, sometimes it's nice to leave the glass off afterwards rather than put it behind the glass. So if you do use watercolours, I'm sure there's loads of you out there that know loads of techniques, but the way I like to waterproof my watercolours is with gambling wax. I don't know if anyone uses this.
Okay. I haven't used that before.
Yeah, it's quite scary the first time you do it, but if you get a lint-free cloth, clean lint-free cloth at the end, when you've got your watercolour, you dab some on, a bit like saddle soap, saddle wax, and you kind of rub it over your watercolours, and they don't move at all. And then you could splash them with water, and they don't.
Oh wow! I bet it's scary putting it on there though, and it starts to smear.
It won't smear, but the first time you do it is scary, so maybe test it first on a little test.
And what's it called? What kind of wax is that?
It's Gamblin cold wax. There's probably other brands. You can get this in the UK and I think the USA. I'm not sure about other parts.
Yeah, I'm going to write that down and I'll put it in the comments. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Gamblin cold wax medium. And that's a really good top tip, because I think watercolors are quite maligned sometimes. You know, I mostly paint in oils for my big originals, but I love water-based medium. But the problem is that it does run and, you know, kind of quick twist. So let's get started. I was going to move my computer around and then I'll just check that you can see, because I've changed my setup. So I do want to just double check that you can see.
And then I'll put you on full screen so that we can see everything that you're doing.
Awesome.
And then please, if anyone has any questions to ask Kelly as we're going along, please do. I will ask Kelly as we go. Rebecca says, I love Barmouth. Yeah, I do. It's not far. It's like out of this seaside town.
What country is it? Dorset?
June, hi from Belfast. Oh, Shivali's tuning in, says hi from South Africa. Her place growing up as a child on a 5-acre plot. Kaz says she doesn't have a special place because she doesn't attach emotions to places, but she does love tropical scenery like Caribbean and Malaysia. Oh, that's a nice one. You can do a lovely one with big graphic plants and all the colours, you know, the big flowers.
Cool.
Right, so I'm going to flip
to go. What I would suggest doing first of all is starting with your template. So if you're going to use something from a frame, like I said, don't throw this part away that the frame comes with because it's brilliant for a template. So let's start there. I've already pre-cut a piece of paper. That's how technical I am. I've cut a piece of paper. So you can see it's just a good match for the template. So I can now put that to one side. And I'm just going to take my source material. So for those of you who maybe didn't see this earlier, if you're just joining, this is my source image, which is Norfolk in the east coast of the UK. It's obviously a coastal region, but it's very flat, and it's got lots of creeks and water, and it has these amazing huge skies and lots of little boats. And like I said before, let's keep it stylish and graphic rather than doing lots and lots of twee boats. If you want to do lots and lots of twee boats, that's totally fine too. So all I'm going to do is start off with creating the centerpiece of the memory landscape. So the centerpiece is going to be our actual drawing or creation. So let's start off by doing that. So I'm going to do mine as a landscape orientation. You can do landscape portrait orientation as well. Sometimes they look fantastic like that if you have the right composition. So for this, we obviously have a really big sky, but I also want to make sure I've got some of this space in my drawing because I want to do collage here. Which I'll explain when we get to that point. So I might just kind of crop the composition down a little bit. So I just keep things really, really loose. I will show you how loose I keep my sketchbooks just quickly. What I mean by doing loose stuff is perhaps things like these. So, oh gosh, I find it so hard to work out the cameras.
No, we can see. Yeah, we can see.
Yeah, so stuff like this where it's really loose, sort of pen and wash, watercolors or, you know, acrylic ink splashed on. So I tend to keep a sketchbook like this for little trips I go on instead of photo albums or as well as photo albums. So I'm not really going to think about it too much. Obviously with the landscape, many people will tell you don't put the horizon dead center. Similarly, with a lot of compositions, people will often say dead center of a composition is not the best way to go. So I'm going to give myself, going to be a couple of mil all the way around. How much collage? I'm going to kind of do the hard or the gravel bank, just enough to give myself a little bit of collage room because I want to still keep this big sky and the beautiful sea. I'm going to give myself the horizon line, perhaps a little bit lower than where that was. It's nice to give it a little bit of shape. It's not totally flat, Norfolk. It is kind of flat, but it's not, it undulates because it's natural, right? So what you don't want to do is necessarily make everything totally straight in landscape. So then we have this kind of grassy bit of the bank, which tends to come down and back up. And then we have the actual bank and the boat. I'm going to put the uprights in a moment. I don't know what they call them. You'd think for a landscape artist that that I would know some of the terms, some of the boats and things that I paint, but I really don't.
Rebecca has a question. She says she doesn't have any 3D objects associated with her place. Does that matter? Can she use anything else?
No, it doesn't matter at all. It could be that you want to keep it all sort of more two-dimensional as a piece. But if you want to add an element of something that's three-dimensional, maybe there's something that reminds you of it. Maybe it's something that you could make out of paper. So maybe it's something that if it was, for example, the tropical landscape, it might be something that you would cut some really beautiful tropical leaf shapes out of some paper and kind of build them up into more of a 3D element. It may be that if it's somewhere that's in your country but not the exact same location, things might grow in your own garden that are similar. So you might go out and take some leaves or some things from your own space that remind you of that place. I mean, ideally, the whole point is that you want something that reminds you of that place. So if you can anchor it, that's really all you need to do. So like I said, I'm going to ignore the second boat because it's just kind of there. This is what's great about art, right? That's there in the photo. I'd have to be great at Photoshop to take that out, but because I'm drawing it, I could just choose, leave it out. Yeah, I just put in a bit of the line. And then I'm going to break. Unfortunately, I didn't think about this when I was taking the photo, but from a compositional point of view, it would be so much nicer if these two big posts here broke over the horizon, just to kind of give it a bit of interest. So again, I didn't do that in the photograph, but I can do that easily with my own compositions. So they're also quite scratty because they're kind of broken down over the years. So holding your pen really loose is a great way to just kind of let them be. Pull down onto the hard there. This one's probably a bit further back, and don't make them equal. You know, if things, fence posts and walls and panels and things are great in a landscape, and just remember that the further back they go into the distance, the smaller they'll be, the shorter they'll be, and the closer together they'll be, especially if they're a run of a fence. So things like that are really useful to think about, and just kind of let your pen wobble and do things. It's fine. It doesn't have to all be amazing straight lines. And I have got a horizon line in my post, but we're going to paint over that, and I might actually collage into it as well. And that gives me some room to play around with a really nice sky. That's as simple as my drawing is. It looks really basic at this point, but it doesn't have to be much more than that. When I'm laying down a sketch ready for an actual large proper oil painting, I don't do much more than, I don't know, if it's a simple landscape like this, maybe the same sort of 5, 6, 7 lines. It doesn't have to be any more than that. There's also a lovely little run of water that kind of comes down out of the creek there. So I'm just going to put that in just as a bit of interest. So hopefully we've all started to think about our centerpiece, and let's sketch it out and let's start to colour it in. I'm quite a fast worker, so by the end of the hour, we might have like 5 demo pieces.
I think it's quite an interesting process, though, isn't it, when you start to do this initial sketch, because you are literally looking for shapes. And I've just realised my piece is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's like 6 main blocks of shapes. Yeah. And that's really interesting when, you know, as an artist, when you start to dissect an image and start to break it down like this, you start to realise the simplicity of what you're looking at.
Yeah, exactly. You know, that boat, your eye knows that's a boat because your brain's telling you it's a boat because of the context. So what your eye sees is not what your brain sees. You know, your eye sees a shape, you know, that could be anything really, but your brain fills in the gaps. So my work is quite impressionistic and quite modern in that way, and I'll often just make a mark for something, and that's okay, because once you put it into context of, this is a painting, this is a landscape painting, these are a bunch of houses, that's the sea, this is a boat, people go, oh, I see, that's a boat, that's a house. So you don't have to overpaint things too much, so don't worry about those. I obviously use very high technical equipment, like recycled yogurt pots. It was quite nautical. So things like ribbons and buttons and haberdashery are quite good for this kind of thing as well. I don't think I'll put this in, because I think I've gone for a more earthy colour palette than the sort of traditional red, white and blue of the nautical, but it's just to show you that you can you can use all sorts that are around the house that you want to use. So I'm just going to mix up some lovely cyan for the sky. I use Winsor & Newton professional watercolours. I sometimes use Daniel Smith, but they're very expensive and they are absolutely glorious and wonderful. But I just find the Winsor & Newton are very accessible, easy to get hold of, great big range of paints, and the professional range really does give you a bit of extra zing with colours. So this sky, we can see, you kind of get this sort of plain haziness at the horizon, but then you get these misty clouds, high summer. It's really difficult when you're starting with watercolor. I used to forget all the time to leave the white. So the best way that I can tell you how to leave white is to not think about painting the whole picture. So when I was first starting, a lot of people would try and teach me how to do things like a wash and put a whole background in. And that's where I found that I forgot. And I was so busy trying to get the wash to go really well that I forgot and I covered everything in paint. And then once you've done that, there's no going back with watercolor. So what I try and do now is think about actually leaving, letting the page kind of peep through and just leaving space. So I love to use a really flat brush to do clouds like these because you can just dab it on. And those of you who are watercolorists will know, I'm going to put a tiny touch of warmth in the skies as well. So there is a little bit of warm as you come further down, and that will link it into the colour palette below. So those of you who are watercolorists will know you can do so much just with a nice bit of water on your brush. You don't actually have to do a great deal with the colours at all. They do it for you, really. I'll turn it. Is that better? Yeah, that's better.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
I'm going to add some more colour in because we all know that watercolour dries like way, way lighter than you think it's going to. So it's nice just to drop in the colour and see what happens. Let it run and do its thing. Obviously, I'm on a slight angle here. So if you were doing it flat, it might be easier to control it. Don't forget that you've got 2 or 3 mil if you're putting it in a frame. So if you're going to put any nice details in, for example, I've put the little creaky bit in here. Probably should have put it a little bit further across, but hey ho, we live and learn. And you can just pull that down, but this is supposed to be dead sketchy. So don't worry too much if you think it looks rough, because this is one part of what we're doing, right? So just a tiny bit of indigo just to kind of deepen the sky, because we all know that skies start deeper and come paler as they come down towards the horizon. So this is just one element of our memory landscape. It's the centerpiece, but we're going to do other things with it. So if you really hate it, you could totally cover it up with collage or re-scribble on it. It really doesn't matter. So I've only brought 2 brushes to use. I say only brought, here it is underneath. And I think it's rolling away. That's really all you need is nice pointed round. That does a lot of things, from tiny details to something like a flat, just to give you a different sort of shape and texture. I also have my crusty stick, which I use a lot when I use acrylic inks, which we'll come on to. So for me, the acrylic inks really help give us a pop. Acrylic inks are the thinnest version of acrylic paint you can get, basically. So they give you a lovely pop of colour and a real sort of depth that you struggle a bit to get with watercolour. So in my picture, we have got, I don't know if you can see it with the resolution screen, there is a kind of yellow, top of the reeds, top of the scrub, it's kind of yellow, comes darker into this bank, and then we have the sand, then we have the water, and then we go back to the sand. So I'm just going to, again, you can look for shapes when you're drawing, but you can also look for shapes when you're painting. So it's really easy to have a shape of a line or a square. It doesn't have to be the perfect field or the perfect ideal that you have in mind for what a tree looks like. For example, like we just said, you know, you see something with a blob of green on the top and your mind reads it as a tree because it's next to something else that you know is in the landscape. So I'm going to save the red for the bank actually. So I'm just going to mix a little bit of the yellow with the red. I'm quite a messy painter, so it won't stay true. I don't know about anyone else.
No, I'm really messy.
Yeah, some people are dead neat, aren't they? Just going to darken it.
I'm the messiest person I know.
And some people's process is to be really particular, and that's brilliant. You know, my process is to kind of slap it on and see what happens. So I'm just darkening up some of this light red. I think with some sepia, it might be, no, I think that's Payne's grey actually. Because the bank suddenly gets quite dark. One of the things around watercolour that usually gives you that pop is the combination, like any painting, of light and dark, as we know, but also the combination of hard and soft. So you can have some really lovely soft edges where things are running in, but then you can also have some nice hard edges and kind of leave that hard. And you can see in the sky when I hold it up in a minute that we've got a bit of both going on. So what's great is to be able to mix it up. Is everybody, what kind of paints are people using or drawing, by the way? Just on the comments, it'd be nice to know.
Yeah, tell us in the comments. Stacey's put something here. I need to read this out. I have a 3D object associated with a place. My dad has it, but he has promised it to me when he dies, as it's really, really important. It's a piece of wood that we found together on Tenby Beach. We both mistook it for a shiny shell, but it's beautifully polished by the sea. Piece of driftwood. We've had it for 35 years. Oh, wow. Isn't that
Gosh. And isn't it strange how, you know, that's not the crown jewels, but to those guys, that's the crown jewels, right?
Yeah.
And that's what's really important about place, is that absolute anchor and connection to a time. Place and time seem to go together so much, you know. It's like people cannot escape. When you say a place to someone, you don't just think of the location, you think about when you were there and what you did there. It's just absolutely natural. You can't help yourself, really. So I've just put in the row here, the yellow, and then the darker line of where the bank comes. And then what we find is that we get lighter as we come forward. Don't be afraid to leave some white. And this is where the sandier sort of bit starts. So I'm just kind of letting it be a bit more loose. A bit more loose. It's so loose anyway, but a bit more looser. You'll find all sorts of amazing technical language when I do a demo. Looser, things like that.
It's what we all understand.
I know, right? It's like, yeah. And a big tip as well for sand or mud is wet sand and mud is darker than dry sand and mud. So it's always a good one to bear in mind, especially if you're doing water and seascapes and things. So we're going to just pull the bank down a touch.
Rebecca's using watercolour, and Shivani's using a combination of media: acrylic, twigs, leaves, perhaps oils. Wow, yay.
Yeah, nice. It's really great to use oil pastels with watercolours as well. If you've got some really nice rough paper, I think this is just a medium knot, but if you've got a really good rough or textured paper, you can use oil pastels first and do that lovely resist. So you can have things like foliage or sand or a gnarly rock, you know, give it a bit of acrylic oil pastel, first, and go over it, and then you get that lovely resist, and you'll get the bits of pastel coming through. So that's the same red, light red that I'm using. It's not really sand in Norfolk. So this is kind of the earthy tones that you tend to get in the landscape, the ochres, the reds, the oranges. You can see I've put some of that into the sky just to kind of give it a little bit of similarity as to, you know, colour tone throughout. I'm leaving the boat white because in watercolour you don't paint white, although you can cheat and you can put white on, or you can put white acrylic or a white acrylic ink. And the purists out there would probably scoff at you, but who cares? Let them do what you want to do. There's a lovely blue on the bottom of the boat. I'm going to, let me think. I don't want it to be exactly the same as the cyan of the sky. I'm just going to put a tiny bit of yellow because it is more of like an eggshelly sort of colour, and I'm just going to give that one little line through there. There's a lovely red bit on the bottom as well, so I'll come back and do that. We're going to also use some of that below, because obviously we've got a reflection to think about here as well. And that's where we can use the difference between the hard and the soft line. So again, just a lot of water pulling it down is just perfect. And then we, on the picture, if you see the reflection, we've got the blue and then we've got the white and then we've got a little bit of the mast, and it's very, very soft. So this is perfect using wet into wet technique versus the boat, which has got these lovely hard edges, which is what we've done with the ink and wash. So you can define the edge, top edge of the boat. So let's do some water. I'm going to use Windsor red shade, Windsor blue red shade. I love this blue because it's really warm, but it's so bright and beautiful and lovely blue. And for me, it's got a richness that cobalt and ultramarine don't have as much. And I know ultramarine is like one of the most amazing blues, but okay, so we've got, I'm going to do some more, use this brush. I'm going to just get the paper a little bit wet. And the top tip is, even if you're doing a wash or just getting some water on the paper with watercolours, is like I said before, if you're a bit like me and you forget to leave the white, don't make everything wet. So instead of washing the whole bit of the space of that piece of paper, don't do that. Leave some of it dry so you can get a different sense of colour, because the paper will do the work for you. Then you'll get the whites from the paper that you left. So I'm going to use water to pull it through. And this is a lovely, lovely thing about water-based mediums, is that you just get such a lovely run. You know, nothing else quite does it the same. It's quite hard to get a sense of movement and water sometimes when I'm using my oils. Not the same as the water-based stuff. You just get all these gorgeous little accidents. I sound like Bob Ross now. Happy accidents.
I love that quote that, oh gosh, what is it now, where something's gone wrong when you just turn it into a bird. That's it, it's a bird.
Yeah, it's always a bird. Happy little trees as well. You always have happy little trees. Warm at the top, because obviously we've got the sandy bank running through. So that can reflect in. The thing about Norfolk landscape, and I don't know where everyone's painting, but the thing about Norfolk particularly is that it kind of does merge in on itself. So the sky and the sea tend to merge because it's all so big and so flat. And then you have these sort of sand and mud banks and creeks, and then the water is very shallow, and sometimes obviously that with the tide it's covered in water, and sometimes it's not. More so than cliff based coastal areas where there's a hard finish with the cliff and the granite or whatever. With Norfolk and the marshes and places like that, there's more of a merging of things that come together, which I find quite interesting. So that's kind of it. I think I need to do a rope for the, I was going to put some red on, wasn't I, at the bottom of the boat. It would have been nice to perhaps use some cad red, really make it pop, but I haven't got it in here, so I just use this tiny bit for the And like I said, this doesn't have to be perfect. This is trying to evoke a sense of feeling and place rather than be the main part of the whole thing. So far, this is what I have. So we've got the warmer blue bringing, hopefully, and the warmer reds of the bank bringing this further forward. So as we all know, cooler tones set things further back in perspective, warmer tones bring forward. That's really important with landscape. And like we said before, you can change it. It doesn't actually have to be the colours that you see. The colours are nowhere near as bright as that in the image. But I make everything like 50 times, million times brighter anyway in my pictures. So I think what I want to do now is, that's going to dry. So that's the centerpiece element, and you can take your time to do that. You can go away and do that and come back to this recording and carry on, or you can do it as quickly or as slowly as you like. What I was going to do next was look at the layers that I wanted to do for this hard ground in the front here, this foreground. So I wanted to do some collage in there. I've got some nice papers and some brown paper, which I think is often overlooked for things like collage. And what I love is these earthy tones that you get. So I'm going to just cut out some shapes. I'm going to start with, not quite as long, so I'm just going to cut out some slightly fluidish sort of shapes. Don't forget we're going to stick over the top. So.
And how are you choosing your shapes now? Are you looking on your picture just for some shapes that stand out?
So I'm looking for similar sort of curved, fairly flat shapes that mimic the background.
Yeah.
Like I said about this particular landscape, it merges together. So when you're stood on this foreground of rock and mud and sand, it's almost exactly the same as this rock and mud and sand over here. It's just that you're stood at this side. There's no sort of cliff edge that stops. It all kind of merges. So I'm going to try and get sort of slices of colour that I can overlay that feel, that feel kind of similar to the shapes we have going on in the background. So nothing hugely dramatic, but things that have an organic shape to them. I'm actually starting a class tonight with Adult Learning Services, a free class about Matisse.
Oh,
so
nice.
making me think of that whilst I'm doing my collaging. Obviously, he famously did collage brilliantly. So I'm not saying I'm Matisse. I'm just saying I started. Actually, no, let's tear as well. Tearing is always great in collage because you get a really natural shape because you generally can't control it. It's harder to control. And you get the lovely edge as well in a tear.
And there's something very therapeutic about tearing paper.
Yeah, I love it. Tearing and sticking. It sends me back to like primary school, which what creativity is all about. That's when you're most creative, isn't it? Like when you're 5 or 6.
Yeah.
So stuff like this, you can just layer up. And I actually like the tear. There's often some water left on the hard as well. So don't forget that even though you stood on one part of the landscape, you may have some other elements creeping in. So if you're in a meadow, there might be flowers and you might move to the path and the flowers might have popped up in the path. Don't forget things that bring the whole landscape together. So you have all this going on. So you can choose to layer it up. I'm going to use some more of the dark at the back. I'm going to start sticking it on with Pritt sticky stuff. But again, if you want to keep these and make them last longer, then definitely use some proper collage pastes and glues because Pritt stick is not going to do it. It is not archival that I know of. Don't know if anybody else disagrees with that. So I'm just going to stick it on because otherwise I won't be able to demo it to you because obviously I will be holding it up and all the paper will fall off. This is the lovely part, is that you just kind of make it work. And if it goes over the edge of your paper, don't worry, because you can come back to that and just snip it off. It's not a big deal. This is what's nice about collage. I methink that you can just go with the flow. And some people are super technical, aren't they, with their collaging, and like make things happen like magic, which I find entrancing. But my collage is perhaps a little less complicated than that.
Les is asking a funny question. He's asked, just an observation, but is Kelly wiping her brush on her leg?
Kind of. I've got a bit of tissue down. But yeah, I am. Like I said, I'm a messy painter, Les. I have also got painting clothes. Well, actually, I saw a meme going around on Facebook which made me laugh the other week. You might have shared in the hub. I can't remember. It was, I have two types of clothes: those with paint on, and those that don't have paint on yet. And that kind of describes my wardrobe. So at this point, you don't have to be using just plain paper, you know, guys. You can be using those maps and tickets and things. I'm going to start doing that in a second. I just wanted to build a bit of a bank of colour. I'm going to slip this one in there. And put that one on there. What feelings of people are coming up as they're working on their place? I would love to know what things and memories people are getting from this.
Yeah, that's
you'll find it pops up.
Sarah says she's not painting as she's homeschooling 3 boys, but hoping for inspiration for later on today. Oh, lovely.
Oh, cool. This is perfect to do as a family as well. You know, it's really suitable for all ages. You could, even if you don't want to paint or draw the landscape because of ability, you could always use a photograph if you wanted to. My 2 lads are coming home after this. They've been at their dad's for the week, so I have to then homeschool those guys as well. So I know what it's like. No more brown, I don't think. I'm going to start having a look, before I layer up much more paper, in my little catalogue. So things like leaflets that you get when you're traveling, you know, for like little leaflets that advertise things, or catalogues like this, or tourist books or whatever, are really great, because they often have really inspirational things in them for tourists. So you really get nice photography and things. And if it's just for your own personal use, obviously collage is different in terms of, what is the copyright law on collage? Do you know?
Oh yeah, you can chop things up and just put them into collage. Yeah, it's only if you're kind of taking something and replicating it in its entirety that it's infringing copyright.
Right.
But if you're putting something up and using it, then unless it's something recognizable like a logo or something like that, then
yeah, of course. So I'm just going to cut along this map because I want to add some of this, but I think if I added it all just exactly as it was, not because of copyright, but if I added it all as it was, it becomes less interesting. So when you layer things up, it becomes more interesting, or when you have a pop of something that you didn't expect to be there. So this was Brancaster Staithe, which is just near Brancaster, a couple of miles along the coast. I don't know, does anybody know this coastline that I'm using? Just out of interest, it would be nice to know if anybody's aware of Norfolk or travel.
I don't, but I did go to Norfolk when I was very, very young. So I was a bridesmaid for my auntie and uncle, and their wedding was in Norfolk. But I mean, I was 8 years old, I think. So it was a long, 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 long time ago.
Yeah, I just made a decision then to cut through a word because I think that's quite interesting as well. You know, it doesn't have to be exactly like, I know that that's Wells next next to sea, but obviously I've cut the word off. But I quite like that because it makes it perhaps a little bit more interesting. So I'm going to stick that in. I'm just going to put a couple of these in because, like I said, if you just go sticking in a whole map or a whole leaflet, it kind of isn't as nice anymore. So it loses something, I think, when you just go and take somebody else's stuff and
Yeah.
yeah, you know what I mean? I think you have to apply your own creativity to things for them to feel interesting. Yeah. So I think that's where great collages do really well, in the fact that they take materials that are already created, like papers or printed materials, but it's their creativity of it that makes it something. Otherwise, they'd just be forever just sticking other people's stuff onto pieces of card and canvas, which is not what great collage is about. So I just want to, yeah.
And so you're just cutting up shapes and looking for the shapes in the original.
Yeah, just trying to add elements of that bank that was there. The sky is very linear, the banks are very linear, the water is very linear. So I really wanted to keep the collage linear, even the bits, the elements of even the elements of the map I've got linear because obviously it's a coastline. So the shape of the drawing of the map replicates the shape of the collage. So you'll start to see patterns and shapes emerge, and you might be a bit subliminal with it. You know, you might not look for that on purpose, but it will pop up because that's how your brain works. That's how creative brains work, for sure. So I want to leave a really nice space for my objet as well. So I need to be thinking about that. I think I'm going to put it over in this corner, actually. Just a bit more red. I'm just going to try and finish this. So I'm just kind of letting the scissors do what they want, really. I'm getting less curvy as I'm coming to the front, just so that it feels. That's it. You don't have to worry if there's bits of white poking through, like on the watercolour. If bits of white paper poke through your collage, doesn't matter. You know, nothing's perfect in nature and landscape. So it's really important not to try and make things too perfect.
Yeah.
So this is the collage so far. So you can see that I've created, you can see that you've got the lines that go along, which replicate the collage. You've got a little bit of water popping through, the earthy tones. And then what I like to do, move all my bits of paper away, is the 3D object. I'm going to use the very technical blue tack for the demo. Don't use blue tack because it won't stay. It'll drop off. But I haven't got time to paste it on and, you know, let it all dry and stuff. Or no more nails. We use that so much in our house.
Oh yeah, we love no more nails.
Exactly. And then I think I want to do some acrylic inks maybe on to outline my upright stilty things. So I finished with my watercolours, so let me move those away. Give myself a little bit more room. So I've stuck on, for the purpose of this, I've stuck on the knot.
Yeah, oh yeah.
I'm just going to snip off the edges of the collage that went over. This is great for using stuff up as well. You know, if you've got a little bit of watercolour paper or acrylic paper or something left over, you don't know what to do with it, or you've got some things left from another project, it can be a really good way of using things to be creative with.
Yeah, it's a great idea.
You know, I see some people do some really lovely things stitching onto collage as well. If you really like working with textiles and stitching, that can look really effective. I don't have a sewing machine, but I suppose you could do it by hand as well. You could just get some really nice thick silks and thread them through, and that can look really effective. It can look kind of like trails and pathways. If you think about an OS map, so Ordnance Survey map in the UK, but if you think about any sort of map, you know, if you do sort of details that replicate things like that. So I've chopped it down so we can see more of how the collage is going to work. And I love acrylic inks. Careful not to get these on my dining room table.
We've got in trouble during this time where art studios have been, well, dining rooms have been turned into art studios. And
I know. Well, I've already, my son, we got him a pyrography set for Christmas, so I've already burnt my dining room table. Each of the corners I've put like a starfish and seashell design into the corner of the table. My husband was like, "You're doing what?" So I'm just going to use the acrylic inks to kind of just bring a little bit of life into these. I probably shouldn't have gone across them with the horizon line, but hey ho. Don't worry about it. Embrace imperfection.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing.
So everybody has these access to a stick. I use a stick all the time for stuff because they just give you a loose quality. You know, it's really tempting when you've got a brush in your hand to hold it right down near the bristles and to kind of try and make it like a scientific diagram. But that's not what we're doing here. We're trying to just give it a little bit of something. And they work just like watercolor, if you can still see these. So you can bring water through them and make them run, as well as they sit on their own like an ink, so you can use them to write and draw with. So I'm just dotting some water on my brush to help the inks run. And what's nice about inks and watercolors when they run is that they look really loose and organic. So when you're trying to do a thing, you could never paint a piece of wood as easily by doing every detail, unless you're a photorealist, of course, as you can by just letting the ink and the watercolor do their own thing. You know, they'll work harder for you than your brush will usually. Oh, that's not the lid. That's the lid. I might just let it blend a little bit more, actually, because they were quite dark, weren't they, these pillars? So I don't want too much white to come through. Too much white can get a little bit confusing because you do want some elements of dark and light. So as we all know, when we were taught, when we were first starting out, if you squint or wear sunglasses, you know, you could get a really good idea of the difference between dark and light in your painting. And what else is quite nice in a landscape is writing words as well. So if it meant something to you, you can maybe write that memory. I did another one, a landscape. I'll quickly grab it. I'll be 2 ticks.
Yeah.
Sorry, because we'd set up in the other studio. Right, so this was a demo I did for another group of people, which was the same memory landscape. And this one was based on a Scottish, this was going back towards Glencoe, actually. And I did use the map here. In lockdown, I didn't actually have a map, so I did printed it off. So it's not as good high res as I would like. There are these beautiful yellow colours and reds, but I actually went on a retreat called Emerge, and I thought it was a lovely word to use as well. So I just added the type, and it was this pebble from the beach there that I used. So you can see that's one of the deeper frames. So you could write a word on there as well. You could also decorate the frame. Like I said, you know, my son's got a pyrography set. So you could use something like that, or paints to decorate. And then this should be about done. So anything that means something to you, it might be the names of people that you were with while you were there. And that's kind of how a memory landscape works.
Oh, that's lovely.
Because you think, gosh, I remember that place, I remember that day, oh, I love the boats. And then you have the, oh, I picked that up, and so saying, yeah, I've been here and I've been there. And it's just a combination of different things. And you might want to do it all in collage. You might want to do it all in paint and add just a couple of tiny details of collage or 3D elements. But these are the kinds of things that I mean by memory landscape. So these are the end pieces. They're
lovely. They're so sweet. And I just think, what a nice thing to do, you know, after you've been somewhere special. Just like you say, you can just use up old materials, but it's just such a nice process. Jenny just said, I love collage. I can buy my own collage papers with magazines. I enjoy the process of finding imagery in magazines and changing how people see it. For example, it might be a stripy rug, but in context in the collage, it might look like a window. Yeah, you kind of take something.
Exactly.
Let me come back in. Hey. I started to, well, I'm really, really slow. Hold on, which way do I go? But I've just started to I think I would end up like covering the whole thing in collage. I don't know, because I'm starting to get interested in where the shapes are and blocking them out with different textures, and it's like so therapeutic.
And the whole time you're concentrating on somewhere that you love or somewhere with memory, and framing it or giving it as a gift to someone, keeping it in your home or keeping it at work, maybe places where you feel disconnected. That's the best place for a memory landscape. So yeah, it's about connection. So I hope you've enjoyed it.
We have. Thank you so much. I'm just going to check. Has anyone got any comments before Kelly leaves us today? I just want to say thank you so much. That was so relaxing as well, and also really, really special, because it's just made me really take that time, because I've been so busy recently. I think it's so important for us to just take that time to just sit and look back through our photos and remember something and spend a bit of time connecting, and it's really helped. So thank you.
No, you're welcome. If you want to see more of my work, you can just find me on kellyherrick.com, or social media is at I am Kelly Herrick. So you will see it's not exactly like that, but you'll find me.
I am going to put the link now. I am Kelly Herrick. That's the link. If you go and search, you're on Facebook and you're on Instagram as well, aren't you? So you can go and search for Kelly and give her a follow. And if you have any comments, just drop them in. If you're watching the replay, just put some comments in. Kelly's in my group, so if you've got any questions, I can go and fire them over to Kelly and I can get back to you. If you want to ask anything about today's session, please just leave a comment and let us know. We hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give it a like and let us know. And that's it, guys. Thank you very much. Enjoy your day. And before I go, we'd love to see your pictures. So if you could post them on Instagram, or we've got the Virtual Art Studio group and obviously the hub as well. The hashtag is, and I will write it in the comments, it's hashtag UAS Art Relief, and that's just gone into the comments. So if you put anything over on Instagram or in the groups, just either tag us, it's United Art Space, or tag I am Kelly Herrick, and we'd love to see them.
For sure. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Everyone's firing away. Thank you. See you guys. Bye.